review. Book one is about the books that I've read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. She's a certified grief specialist, energy worker, and a life doula, and of course, a fellow podcaster, helping those whose lives have been upended by grief and loss find themselves again. And of course, the author of the book, The Guided Heart, no other than Miss Victoria Volk.
Nice to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, so I published this in 2017, so it's been a hot minute.
Mm. But it's still there, Miss Victoria. That's why we will talk about it. And thank you so much for being part on Book One review. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Yeah, so really, this book was the start of my healing journey. It was the things that brought me support and the things that I was exploring at the start of when I really, probably my personal growth and personal development. But it wasn't until 2019, a couple of years after publishing this book, that I had another loss in my life that really brought back a lot of old wounds. And I realized that grief was really the heart of the things I was experiencing in my life. And I found a certification program called the Grief Recovery Method, and it really spoke to me. And it's an evidence-based program. And I went for the certification essentially to help other people, but also to help myself. And it it was really the impetus for everything else that I've accomplished after. All of the certifications I've gotten came after exploring and really digging into my grief and trauma from my childhood.
So, Miss Victoria, let's begin with the title A Guided Heart. What does it mean to the heart to be guided through grief, especially when someone might feel utterly lost or abandoned? What is the doing, the guiding? But before that, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Miss Victoria. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so actually the book actually came alongside and after I started blogging. So I had started blogging, I think, well, I had a photography business before that for almost 7, 8 years. I had a studio in my home, and I decided I needed a change. It was ready. I felt a calling to um, something deeper, more meaningful, personally. I loved what I was doing, the creative outlet that it provided for me, and being of service to other people in that creative space. But I found myself having a lot of life changes. My youngest was starting kindergarten. I had 3 children, and so I had some identity shifts that were happening at the same time. And so I started to blog about spirituality, things that I was experiencing and exploring. And I did that for I'm not even sure how long I had blogged before the book came about, but that website and blog was called The Guided Heart. And so this book is kind of a follow to up to what I had already been blogging and writing about in the personal development, spiritual space. So that's how this book title came to be. And essentially, I feel like I was guided, right? Like I feel like we have these breadcrumbs in our lives, and only with some self awareness, or if we're open to receiving these messages and the guidance, right? Like that's when can we can choose to follow that. We can, those little kernels, that the breadcrumbs, so to speak. And so I was following the breadcrumbs, and that's what led to. And I'd always wanted to write a book. I just didn't know exactly what it would be about. I was even writing poetry as a child, so writing was always something. It was really a strong suit for me, even growing up. So um, yeah, it seemed like a natural progression, this book did, to what I was already doing. And yeah, it really, it's what I wish would have been there, it's where I was at, right? And so that I would write a very different book now, knowing what I know now about grief itself in particular, because we are very misinformed about grief. There's a lot of myths about grief. We aren't taught as children how to, well, we are taught as children. I'll take that back. We resort to what we know as adults, and what we are taught comes from childhood. So we resort to what we know and what we're taught about grief, and that really isn't a whole lot. So, we, in general terms, we all pretty much respond to grief in the same way, unless we know differently. And that is, keeping busy, trying to replace the loss, um, thinking that time will just heal. Time heals all wounds. That's even a cliche phrase that people say. Um, or we resort to behaviors to make us feel better for a short period of time, which I did that too. Like, I did all those things. We all do those things. We just don't have the awareness of what we're actually doing. And it's really trying to, an attempt to avoid painful feelings and our grief, because we're not taught how to respond to those things. We're taught how to react to those feelings and those experiences, but not how to respond in a healthy way, because our parents weren't taught. I mean, this is not part of grief 101, is not part of a school curriculum. And it's not generally taught in the home. Healthy coping mechanisms and um, communication and active listening, like, these are not things that come natural to us. We have to seek out that knowledge and information, and that's what I received through grief recovery, and it absolutely changed my entire life. It changed my life. It changed how I parent. It changed my relationship with my kids for the better. It improved my communication skill, everything. I tell people it's been the gift that keeps on giving.
Miss Victoria, the book concept, a deep grief with search for spiritual solace. How do you define spiritual solace in this context? Why is grief such potent, if painful, gateway to seeking it?
That for me, because I was a child that experienced a lot of grief and trauma early on, and not being taught how to respond to that, right? Like, I blamed God. I did not go to church after, we stopped going to church after my dad passed away. And my mom wasn't in a relationship that was healthy, and they definitely didn't go to church. And so we just stopped going to church. And um, faith and spirituality, it was just not a part of the healing process of grief. And um, I think it's very important for people to recognize that just because someone dies, that doesn't mean the relationship ends. We have these unresolved emotional communications that is what keeps the relationship going in our bodies, in our hearts, in our nervous system, right? And when we experience trauma, grief is what's left. And I experienced trauma too after my dad passed away. I mean, this I grew up with it from the age of 6. So I've grown and evolved with grief, and it's definitely shaped me into the person I am. And um, so finding that spiritual solace was a key component of my healing. Um, Rediscovering what it means, um, of consciousness continuing after death, of relationships continuing. It's very healing for people. Um, and it doesn't matter what you believe. I think there's this notion that, I mean, there's so much we don't know, and I'm okay with that. Like, I'm okay with the magic and the mysticism of, the process of dying, and I've learned a lot about that as well. It's normal and it's natural, for the most part, when it happens naturally, right? Like, when we go through the process of dying, the actual process of dying is very natural. Of course, there's traumatic accidents and things like that, but you still have this. The through line is that um, I think consciousness continues, and I think that's where we can feel left behind, right? When someone passes that's close to us, we feel left behind. And that's really not the case. I don't believe that anymore.
Very well said, Miss Victoria. So you frame grief not just a psychological process, but as a spiritual journey. What is a fundamental shift in perspective that occurs when we view our sorrow through this lens?
Well, that's what grief recovery helped me do. I don't think I would have been able to look at my past experiences through a lens other than feeling like a victim had it not been for learning new tools such as forgiveness and apologies and the emotional communications that were left undelivered. Um, I don't think that I would have viewed my past experience differently had it not been for grief recovery because we address those things in grief recovery. Forgiveness is very difficult for people, especially when you've had something really horribly done to you physically, right? Like I was molested as a child and it was someone that I trusted and so it was I had a lot to unpack. Um and and my mom was emotionally unavailable because she had lost her mother and a year later lost her husband. And so I was kind of a lone wolf in my grief and was left to create stories. Really, I just, you create stories. And I just believed that too, that when you died, you just were put in the ground and that was it. And so it gave me a very, uh, I became very cynical about life, really. It was like, is this what life is just for suffering? Because into my 20s too, like these patterns continued, right? What I learned did not serve me into my young adulthood. And I abused alcohol and I was really going down a path of self-destruction pretty quickly. And and what shifted for me was um someone came into my life that had a really strong foundation of faith and um, it wasn't forced upon me. It was something that I came to slowly, but that's kind of the first step that kind of helped me um, shift my perspective a little bit. Like it didn't help me look at my life not as a victim just yet. Um, that took years to unfold. Um, but again, like I said, grief recovery is what really was the paradigm shift in that.
So, Miss Victoria, in the book, Your Other Pathway to Spiritual Solace, could you walk us through one core practice or reflective exercise that helps a grieving person begin to sense the, that guidance or connection when they feel most alone?
So I've always been a journaler. I mean, that's how I channeled a lot of my emotion was through writing and journaling, especially as a teenager. And that's something that I did well into adulthood and still do actually. And I know that's not for everybody, but you can have a voice memo. I mean, you can record voice memos and speak it out loud. Um, Being in nature, I think, is actually really good for our spirit and our hearts. And I think, and maybe that can be a time where you give it to God, give it to whatever higher power, like just speak it into nature, into the environment around you, whatever it is you're feeling or trying to work through. And I think for a lot of people too, it's really difficult to find a heart with ears, someone that can just listen and not um, try and fix, analyze, or judge, right? Like, and that's usually not your own family. Anyone that has skin in your game is probably not the best person to speak to about your personal um, suffering, because as you change and grow, that can be very uncomfortable for the people around you. I did go through some growing pains in that respect, within the context of relationships, because as you grow and change, people who are not on that same journey or path, or haven't recognized in themselves that they're a griever, um, and are choosing to do all those behaviors and things that make them feel better instead of addressing the pain of their grief, they're you're going to be you're going to be in a different place in your journey of grief, and your healing. And I mean, that's where relationships tend to fall away. And I've heard it many times from other grievers, and the 5+ years of my podcast alone, like, many people have shared that as they were growing and changing with their grief, like, their relationships changed too.
Very well said, Miss Victoria. So, a major challenge in grief in the silence or perceived absence of God's Spirit and the divine. How do you counsel someone who feels their faith has been shattered by loss or what's the angry at the universe?
That's a difficult one. It really is, because, and again, I've been there. But for some people that have actually experienced trauma, as a result of religious trauma, right? Like religion, like where religion was actually used, as a form of control, or, um, in a very unhealthy way, uh, that's a lot to unravel, and that's why forgiveness is a huge piece of that. And I think too, like, a lot of us are our own worst critics, and, um, internalize a lot of guilt and things onto ourselves. And so I think a lot of the forgiveness too is for us. I think it's all for us, rather than the other person, first of all. And you don't even need to speak to the other person and say, I forgive you, because if you do that, you're probably going to get some pushback, because unless that person feels like they did wrong, you're not going to hear the apology that you really desire. It's really an apology you want, and you're not going to get it, because if they don't have that awareness, you're going to be stuck in emotional jail. And so unraveling all of that is also a part of the grief recovery method. And there are ways that we call it's like there are we can tell the emotional truth of where we are at, and still experience healing as a result. Like, you don't have to, like, blatantly, if you can't say I forgive you, but yet what's more honest is maybe, I'm angry for what you did to me. I'm angry how this impacted my life. Like, we can still tell the emotional truth without saying, I forgive you, if you're not there yet. And that's the beautiful thing about this method as well, is, um, it is a method, but it's very much attuned to the individual experience, because every grief experience is individual and unique.
Individual and unique. Definitely. So, Miss Victoria, certified grief specialist, podcast host, and author, and energy worker. What are your short term and long term goals?
Short term, I'm actually focusing on being a guest on podcasts. So thank you for this opportunity. That's kind of been heavily my focus. Challenging myself to be more visible, which after COVID, or during COVID, well, before COVID, I didn't have an issue showing my face online or doing recording videos and things like that. But, after COVID, just something shifted, and I don't know, it's like I clammed up. And so I'm actually giving myself a challenge to be more visible. So I appreciate this opportunity. So that's short term. Long term, and of course, serving other people, like helping people in their grief, that's a given, and in the energy work that I'm doing. But long term, I have a secret project I'm not open to speaking about yet, but, I feel like it will be my legacy. It will be a legacy project, and I'm I sat on it. It's like one of those things you write down. And if I'm still thinking about this 2 weeks from now, 2 months from now, it's something I should do. And so that's where I'm at. Like, this is something that's really noodling at me. And I think, the universe or the cosmos and God, whatever, is really pushing me to do. And so I'm really feeling guided, and I'm following those breadcrumbs. And um, yeah, I'll be taking action very soon on that project. But yeah, I'm not open to sharing about it yet. But yeah, I can't wait for the day when I can.
Good luck to you girls, Miss Victoria, and looking forward for more success. And what will be your piece of advice for those people out there want to be like you?
I think in grief, we feel like we don't have a choice. We feel like all choice has been stripped away from us. We feel rather stuck in that victim mindset. We feel like things are done to us, not for us. And that's really difficult. It's really difficult to even wrap our head around. Even like, it's, that saying, like, it is what it is. Like, people will say that it is what it is. And that's really about bypassing. But um, if it's meant to be, it's meant to be, or it happened for a reason. That's what a lot of people say. It happened for a reason. And I don't know. I'm not sure on that completely, 100%. But I can tell you, as I sit where I'm at right now, I would not change the person I've become. And I think I had to go through the lessons I did, to be where I'm at today, and to be a voice for other people, to be a conduit for healing for others, and to give space for other people to share their stories. So there's hope. I guess what I'm saying is, never lose hope that you can get to, there is another side. There is another side, and just to not lose hope.
Yes, people, hope is always in the corner. So grab it. And thank you for that empowering advice, Miss Victoria. And can you please recommend a book or books that influence your journey?
Well, by far, I mean, if you don't read mine, read the Grief Recovery Handbook. It is the program that I facilitate in my program, Do Grief Differently. It is the grief recovery method that's in my program, Do Grief Differently, but that book will give you a grief education that you've never received. And that is by far the number one top book that I recommend to people, the Grief Recovery Handbook. Um, yeah, it's been around for over 40 years. I believe it was, yeah, published over 40 years ago. It's international, it's in different languages, and yeah, my number one top recommended resource.
Give it a recommended book, Miss Victoria. So, to wrap up our discussion for today, or before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, because my abstract essay is already in sixth season, abstract poetry in third season, and book 101 review in sixth season as well. Food 101 in its sixth season too, geography 101, Love Letters, Comedy 101, Movie 101, Review Music 101, our fifth season, Science 101, Sex 101 in fourth season, Spiritual Awakening, Trivia 101, Law 101, Mental Health 101, Motivation 101, Entrepreneurship 101, and My Bible Verses 101 are my baby podcasts. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Miss Victoria, if you could impart one lasting message from the book directly to the heart of someone reading this or who is the thick of their sorrow, what would you want the message to be?
I think what I would like to share is a quote that really resonates with me. And it's not in the book because I didn't learn this quote until later, but the more you know it was really the path I was on. So the more you know yourself, the less you look to others to tell you who you are.
Interesting, Miss Victoria. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. Can you please invite our listeners to support your podcast, your book, or any projects that you're doing right now?
Yeah, everything was be on my website, theunleashedheart.com. Podcast is Grieving Voices. And all the links to my social media and everything is on my website. I have a lot of free resources to meet people where they're at.
Yes, people, let's support Miss Victoria Volk, because if you support her, for sure, more and more empowering advocacy like this to rise. So, Miss Victoria, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for the opportunity.
More to come, people. See you soon.